Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for waiting. Now we would like to begin the fourth Tokyo Global Dialogue held by the JIIA, Japan International Institute for International Affairs, the end of the post-Cold War era and the future of the US-led international order. I would like to serve as the moderator for the opening. My name is Ichikawa, Director General of the Institute. Today's program is held with in-person and online format, hybrid format. You can listen to the program both in Japanese and English. Those of you who are here can use the receiver. Channel 1 is for Japanese, Channel 2 is for English. Those of you who are listening in online can use the Zoom function and choose your preferred language. Now, on behalf of the organizers, I would like to call upon Mr. Kenichiro Sasae, President of JIIA, to say a few words.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sasaki, President of the Japan Institute of International Affairs. I'm most grateful and welcoming here at the fourth Tokyo Global Dialogue. In the past 2 years, due to COVID-19, we met remotely. This year, the program is conducted in hybrid format, including both face-to-face and online. And we are so much delighted to welcome you here at the venue of Tokyo Global Dialogue for the first time in 3 years since the first dialogue. And also to those of you who are attending this forum from Japan and outside of Japan remotely, thank you very much for your interest. His Excellency Foreign Minister Hayashi, despite his busy schedule, kindly accepted our invitation to come here and give us a lecture and also take questions. Also, Prime Minister Kishida will come and join us in this venue. As you may know, at JIIA, research findings are disseminated both in Japanese and English, and for that purpose, in 2019, at the time of commemorating the 60th anniversary, we issued the first strategic annual report. And then we hosted the first Tokyo Global Dialogue, which was considered to be quite successful, and for Japan to disseminate its views at high level to the world and for global experts to be engaged in open dialogue. This forum became a flagship program in a short period of time thanks to your support and understanding. Now, the Strategic Annual Report 2022 and the fourth Tokyo Global Dialogue share the common theme: the end of the post-Cold War era and the future of the US-led international order. I would like to briefly look back at international affairs over the past year, which can be aptly deemed a year of drastic change. On February 24th of last year, Russia began its invasion of Ukraine. Immediately thereafter, we held the third Tokyo Global Dialogue with the following recognition: as the Russian military aggression is in violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, we insisted that Russia should immediately end its military operation and withdraw its forces from Ukraine, and that the disputes would be resolved through meaningful diplomatic negotiations. However, 1 year on, we still cannot see a clear path to the war's end. Western countries, including Japan, have implemented unprecedented economic sanctions against Russia and offered Ukraine support with a strong determination to uphold the principle that changes of the status quo by force must not be allowed. many countries have also drastically changed their own security policy. In the face of uncertain energy supplies and inflation, however, the sustainability of support for Ukraine and the resilience of democracy are being tested. In the Indo-Pacific region, tensions between the United States and China increased in 2022, especially over Taiwan. We see no prospects of a significant easing of bilateral tensions this year. Russia and China have become more united in confrontation with the West of democracy versus authoritarianism, or a new Cold War, as some call it, is dividing the world into blocks. This may be left to further discussion among the participants. And at the same time, around Japan, North Korea is accelerating their nuclear arms and missile development. That is a hard fact that we are faced with. International cooperation through multilateral fora such as the United Nations is in serious jeopardy. Countries in the global south, which are most affected by the food and energy crisis, face the challenge of securing their national interests in an increasingly unstable international order. And this fragmentation and instability, the post-Cold War era, has come to a complete end, or at least about to come to a complete end. The future of the rules-based international order led by the United States since World War II has become increasingly uncertain. In December 2022, as the international situation was going through dramatic change, the Japanese government revised 3 policy documents, including the National Security Strategy. It sets out diplomatic approaches for Japan to reinforce the free and open international order, with a focus on the Japan-US alliance and greater cooperation with like-minded countries such as Australia. Regarding defense, the strategy stipulates drastic strengthening of Japan's defense capabilities, including the need for counterattack capabilities and an increase in defense-related budget level to 2% of GDP. These measures can be said to represent a major shift in Japan's post-war security policy, and it is important to implement these policies speedily and steadily with the understanding and support of the general public. Japan is currently a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for a 2-year term from the start of 2023, and it is also presiding over the G7 this year. And thus, Foreign Minister Hayashi just came back from G7 Foreign Minister meeting and came to join us. Where the war in Ukraine continues and the security situation in the Indo-Pacific becomes more tense, various global issues also need to be tackled urgently. It is increasingly important to promote unity and solidarity with many countries of Global South. In the programs for today and tomorrow, we will discuss the role of Japan and expectations for its diplomacy as it assumes important international responsibilities. This has been a brief summary of my own views, and naturally, other participants will have their own opinions. The Tokyo Global Dialogue, as its name suggests, provides a platform for open international dialogue, and we welcome lively discussions in the upcoming sessions. Today, following the opening session, there is a roundtable where experts of the world get together to discuss international affairs and the prospect, as well as issues faced with by the Japanese diplomacy. Tomorrow's program will be conducted online. In the morning, U.S.-China competition and the Indo-Pacific region, politics and security, economy, and maritime security around Japan will be discussed in 3 sessions. In the afternoon, we will discuss impact of war in Ukraine in 2 sessions, that is politics and security and economy. And lastly, we will have a wrap-up session to discuss the future of the U.S.-led international order and expectation to diplomacy by Japan. Hope that you would join us tomorrow as well. Once again, thank you very much for joining with us, and this concludes my opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Yoshimasa Hayashi, Foreign Minister, will give us a speech entitled Developing a Fine-Tuned Japanese Diplomacy for a New Era. Following the lecture, the Minister will entertain questions from the participants. We will confine the questions to those from the participants at the site. Now I would like to invite Minister Hayashi. Mr. Oka, Chairman, Mr. Sasae, President, distinguished ladies and guests and ladies and gentlemen, I will speak in Japanese. I would like first to congratulate you all on the 4th Tokyo Global Dialogue held by the JII, one of the leading diplomatic and security think tanks in Japan, which received the 2020 Think Tank of the Year award. It is my great pleasure and honor to give an opening speech in front of the distinguished international audiences here today, following my video message last year. At the outset, I would like to mention the ballistic missile launches by North Korea. The fact that North Korea has repeatedly launched ballistic missiles with an unprecedented frequency in an unprecedented manner, including the launch of an ICBM-class ballistic missile last Saturday and ballistic missile launches this morning, poses not only a clear and serious threat to Japan's national security, but also a challenge to the international community, which is totally unacceptable. On the 18th, the day of the launch of the ICBM-class ballistic missile, at the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting in Munich, I myself strongly condemned this launch and confirmed the G7's cooperation in dealing with North Korea. I also held a foreign ministers meeting with U.S. Secretary of State William Blinken and South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin, and reaffirmed our continued close cooperation with the U.S. and the Republic of Korea, ROK, bilaterally, as well as between Japan and the U.S. and ROK trilaterally. Furthermore, Japan has requested and is currently coordinating an emergency meeting of the Security Council on North Korea. Japan will continue to coordinate with the international community to promote the full implementation of the relevant UN Security Council resolutions and aim for the complete denuclearization of North Korea. In my video message last year, I stressed how the world is at a new historical turning point since the end of the Cold War. 1 year later, with Russia's aggression against Ukraine shaking the very foundation of the international order, the end of the Cold War era is clear for all to see, as mentioned by Mr. Sasae earlier on. This is entirely coincidental, but the state of the international order after World War II is strangely in line with Japanese eras. The late Showa period coincided with the Cold War period when the world was divided between the US and the Soviet Union. The Heisei period then coincided with the post-Cold War period. And now, as we live in the Reiwa period, the shape of the new era following the post-Cold War era is still not in sight. One thing is clear, however. The challenges we face today are evolving rapidly, increasing in their complexity and becoming more interconnected at a rate never before experienced by humankind. For example, Russia's aggression against Ukraine has led to a variety of problems, not to mention its own seriousness. Aggression, which violates sovereignty and territorial integrity, is a violation of the fundamental principles of international law, including the UN Charter, and is a blatant challenge to the international order based on the rule of law. At the same time, it is accompanied by other far-reaching challenges such as the global food and energy crisis, the threat of nuclear weapons, and the abuse of emerging technologies such as cyber attacks, and the spread of disinformation. And what is worse, this situation is making it difficult for the international community to work together to address challenges such as climate change, infectious diseases, nuclear disarmament, and non-proliferation, terrorism, and conflict that continue to threaten people's security. All of these problems are serious and difficult. But what makes today's situation even worse is the fact that these problems are intricately interrelated and intertwined in a complex manner. At this difficult turning point in history, the collective wisdom and efforts of humankind through dialogue and cooperation among the international community are necessary. So today, I would like to talk about the specifics of the challenges that lie ahead of us and the way in which Japan, through its diplomacy, should respond to them. Now, before examining the nature of our current challenges, let us first look back at what the post-Cold War Cold War period was like. The greatest legacy of the post-Cold War era is the free and open international order based on the rule of law, and that the international community, especially developing countries, achieved dramatic development under this order. Disputes between nations, whether over territory or economic interests, must be resolved by rules and laws, not by force. Fairness, transparency, and predictability must be guaranteed under this order. Such a trend toward international cooperation had been enhanced during the 3 decades of the post-Cold War era. The world was not able to eliminate every armed conflict, but we should not underestimate the fact that the international community continued to exert efforts to resolve regional conflicts through dialogue. According to World Bank statistics, the GDP of high-income countries has more than tripled over the past 30 years, while the GDP of middle and low-income countries has grown by about 10 times. Their share of the global economy has increased from 16.5% to 37.8%. During the post-Cold War period, we also witnessed innovative emerging technologies. The development of digital technologies, such as the Internet and information devices, has accelerated the expansion of global connectivity. The free flow of information and rapid online transactions are an integral part of our economy and society today. While the post-Cold War period saw such positive developments and achievements, it is also true that various issues have come to light. The international order based on the rule of law, which was the basis for the growth of the international community, has been challenged in the last decade by unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force and coercion by newly gained powers. Russia's aggression against Ukraine has been fundamentally shaking this order. The United Nations Security Council, which is responsible for maintaining international peace and security, has not been effective in responding to this situation. Furthermore, even though globalization based on liberal economies has reduced disparities among nations, some countries, such as LDCs, have not fully benefited from this trend. In developed countries, domestic disparities and poverty have rather widened, and people's anxiety and dissatisfaction have caused political and social divisions. In addition, economic security has emerged as a new challenge. The vulnerability of global supply chains became evident in the midst of the pandemic. Some countries do not take coercive actions against other countries by leveraging economic dependence and their huge markets. The challenge we face from the theft of international property and sensitive technology has also become evident. Moreover, debt problems caused by opaque and unfair development finance cast a shadow over the future of developing economies. Abuse of emerging technology is also a serious threat. Cyber attacks are not limited to wartime. Attacks on critical infrastructure, interference in other countries' elections, ransom demands, and theft of sensitive information are also taking place even in peacetime with the involvement of government agencies. The spread of disinformation via social networking services also risks disrupting elections, which are the foundation of democracy, and the policymaking process, including foreign policy. Global issues such as climate change and energy security have become increasingly apparent, even as the importance of ensuring energy security has been reaffirmed by the aggression against Ukraine. The 2050 net zero goal must be pursued. In today's globalized world, problems that humanity has repeatedly faced, such as infectious diseases like COVID-19, terrorism, and conflicts, are also expanding at an unprecedented rate, spreading their effects beyond national borders and becoming intricately interrelated with other challenges.
Here, taking into account the above-mentioned challenges, I would like to emphasize once again that all of these challenges we face should be resolved through multilateral cooperation based on dialogue and under the order based on the rule of law. This is a lesson learned from the failure of humanity in the last century, when distrust of multilateralism and economic blocs based on self-centered mentalities eventually led to the last World War. The international community must continue its efforts in reinforcing the United Nations to address the dysfunction of the Security Council, in creating new roles in addition to maintaining existing roles to address new challenges, and in resolving global issues through negotiations and the setting of international goals. All of these are based on the principle and the rule of law. We must not allow attempt to alter the existing order to suit their own purposes, through force or coercion, or to divide the international community with false narratives. In the year of 2023, as a new era dawns with its daunting challenges, Japan is charged with leading the international community as the presidency of the G7 and as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. In this context, I'd like to outline the fundamental ideas and development of Japanese diplomacy that will usher in a new era. I mentioned that the challenges we face are characterized by their complex interconnectedness and that they cannot be resolved without dialogue and cooperation among all the countries of the world acting as responsible parties. Through my dialogues with various counterparts since I assumed the position of Foreign Minister in November 2021, I have come to reaffirm that it is precisely at this difficult time that Japan should take the lead in conducting a fine-tuned diplomacy, which I think is a strong point of Japanese diplomacy. This approach to a diplomacy is in fact deeply rooted in Japan's history and experiences. Since ancient times, Asia has nurtured a variety of values based on diverse religions and cultures such as Buddhism, Confucianism, Hinduism, and Islam. Japan has cultivated a spirit of tolerance common to these various values and fostered respect for diversity. After abandoning a national isolation policy and opening up the country, Japan achieved modernization through dialogue with the West. Following Japan's defeat in World War II, we proceeded a reconstruction with the support of the international community And as Japan became an advanced nation, it made its corresponding efforts to contribute to the world as a bearer of the international order. Japanese diplomacy, nurtured in this historical context, respects diversity of society, culture, and history of the other countries and attaches importance to inclusiveness through dialogue. In dialogue, we seek to find common challenges and provide support that is truly needed while respecting the positions of other countries. We believe that this kind of steady diplomacy will further strengthen the free and open international order based on the rule of law. This approach to Japanese diplomacy is not an invention of a current era, but rather a concept that has been developed by our predecessors over the course of time. At the same time, I believe that it is a way of thinking that is required in this new era of international society, where we find it difficult to converge on a single set of values. So, what kind of diplomacy will Japan pursue this year as a G7 presidency holder and as a non-permanent member of the Security Council? Here, I'd like to focus on 3 points. The first is to uphold the international order based on the rule of law, which is the foundation of a foreign policy. Last month, I chaired the UN Security Council Ministerial Open Debate on the rule of law in New York. At this debate, which was attended by 77 members, the largest number in the past year, I received support from many countries for my call for uniting for the rule of law. The United Nations is a universal international organization that has upheld multilateralism since the end of World War II. Instead of lamenting the dysfunction of the Security Council, we should turn the sense of crisis into momentum to gather a wisdom on strengthening the UN functions, including Security Council reform. Last week, at the first G7 Foreign Ministers meeting under the Japanese presidency in Munich, we reiterated the G7's firm commitment to uphold the international order based on the rule of law. Together with all like-minded countries, we will continue to defend this rule-based order. The second is a response to global challenges. In order to counter the challenges of the new era, as already mentioned, we are currently working on revising the Development Cooperation Charter, which is expected to be released in the first half of this year. In addition, as the holder of the G7 presidency, Japan will take the lead in addressing global issues such as energy and food security, climate change, health, and development, and we will also cooperate with India as the holder of the G20 presidency. Third, we must realize a free and open Indo-Pacific, or FOIP. At the Munich Security Conference last week, I called for the promotion of FOIP as a vision that will lead the Indo-Pacific region, which is at the center of a historic shift in the balance of power, to peace, stability, and prosperity in these difficult times. A free and prosperous Indo-Pacific will lead to world peace and prosperity. As with ASEAN, which is a keystone for the realization FOIP, will set out a new vision for ASEAN-Japan relations around December, commemorating the historic 50th year of friendship and cooperation. Through a fine-tuned diplomacy that emphasizes diversity and inclusiveness, we will lead an international order based on dialogue and cooperation that transcends differences of region and value and conflicts of interest. In the midst of serious tangled international crises, including the situation in Ukraine, cooperation beyond individual interests is becoming increasingly difficult. We hear voices of concern about the fragmentation of the international community. However, in the stormy seas of this new era, where all challenges are intricately intertwined, all nations that wish for the peace and prosperity of humanity are in the same boat. It is only when each rower demonstrates its ability and rows the ship in unison with the same breath that we will be able to overcome our common difficulties. What is required of us now is to defend the rule of law, not the rule by force. we must coexist and prosper together in a spirit of dialogue and cooperation in an inclusive manner that leaves no one behind and respect the diversity of the members of the international community. In this sense, I believe that this meeting, which bears the name Global Dialogue, is an increasingly meaningful initiative for the coming era. The Japanese government is determined to take the helm in maintaining and strengthening a free and open international order based on the rule of law, through a fine-tuned diplomacy, and in finding the way of resolving the challenges of the new era. Thank you for your attention.
Minister Hayashi, thank you very much. This was an insightful talk for discussion at Tokyo Global Dialogue today and tomorrow. Thank you very much. Now we would like to start a Q&A session. Due to time constraints, we would like to pick up two previously received questions. And we will receive questions to Minister Hayashi from the floor here and ask Minister Hayashi to give an answer to them all. First, I would like to summarize the previously received questions as follows. Number one, it will be 1 year since the start of Russia's invasion to Ukraine. How do you sum up its impact on Japan and the world? How do you think it will unfold going forward? Question number two. Support for Afghanistan's reconstruction is considered important so as not to turn Afghanistan into a hotbed of international terrorism again. Please tell us how Japan will address this issue at G7 and Quad. So these are the two previously received questions. Now, from people who are at this venue would like to entertain a question. Should you like to ask a question, please raise your hand. And when you are designated, please wait until a microphone is brought to you. Please stand right there and give us your name and affiliation. We would like to just ask you to ask one question per person. In the interest of time, we would like to take just perhaps two questions. So, is there anyone who would like to ask a question? Please raise your hand. So, yes, please go ahead. Thank you, Minister Hayashi. My name is Endo with the University of Tokyo, who teaches the diplomacy. You've just returned from the Munich security dialogue. So I think you are there for the second time. Now, the previous one was pre-Ukraine, so I think the atmosphere was quite different. Well, after Ukraine, where you said East Asia, and well, I believe it is very important for the unity of the West and East with respect to the security. How do you assess the current state of affairs, particularly the willingness and force to change the status quo? I'm concerned about that, but on the other hand, the General Milley of the U.S. forces said China doesn't have any such plan and force, strength. So what is your assessment on this point? I would like to ask you to air your views on your own words. And in Europe, with respect to Europe, now, specifically, which countries did you discuss cooperation? Well, to the extent possible, if you could tell us what you can share with us, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. We will entertain just one more question from the floor. In the rear of the room, There was a lady who raised her hand. My name is Yan from Taiwan, a media person. Now, Ukraine today is the Taiwan of tomorrow. And Prime Minister Kishida says the Ukraine of today is East Asia of tomorrow. What do you make of it, Minister Hayashi? And just the other day, you talked with Wang Yi, the top person of the China's diplomacy, and over the importance of the peace and security over Taiwan. What did Mr. Wang from China respond to what you said? So, because of paucity of time, Minister, including the two previously received questions, and we just heard 2 questions from the floor today. Would you like to answer these questions altogether? Thank you for the questions. First, we had received 2 questions previously. The first question is about it's been a year since the start of Russia's invasion into Ukraine, and how do I sum it up? Now, as I mentioned in the lecture, the Russia's invasion to Ukraine, well, the international community for a long time has made enormous effort and made a lot of sacrifices and established the international order. And the foundation of that is threatened by this behavior. And as you say, it has entailed a lot of problems. And also the invasion, well, the threatening of the integrity and the territorial integrity. Now, including the UN Charter and the principles, the foundations of the principles of international law is violated by these. We are now conducting the diplomacy toward Russia. We would like to establish a peace treaty with Russia. We would like to maintain this principle, but we made an enormous shift because of that. And also this question, well, there is increasingly serious impact of the climate change, the non-proliferation, and terrorism threatening people, and the conflict. The international community, as they grapple with these issues, our effort is becoming increasingly difficult because of Russia's behavior, as I said before. So it has generated a variety of problems. And so how will it unfold? I think different people may have different views. I really cannot definitively say what it will be, but there's a prolongation of the invasion. What is important is G7 and other international community fora. We have to maintain unity, and as soon as possible, we have to stop the Russia's aggression. We have to maintain unity and conduct sanctions against Russia and support Ukraine. I think this is very important. And also about Afghanistan, we have also a question I received. The stability of Afghanistan for the region and also the peace and stability of the international community. I think this is also important. As I visited Central Asia, Afghanistan is in that situation. And for people in Central Asia, it is impacting the people there negatively. I keenly felt that. And with respect to the human rights, it's been worsening since the situation became worse to Afghanistan and the surrounding countries through the international community organizations. We provided $339 million. And as I look back at in the 1990s, Afghanistan was a hotbed of the international terrorism. The country was isolated from the international community. G7 and Quad are a variety of frameworks, and through those frameworks, including India, with the neighboring countries would like to closely cooperate with them, and the whole international community has to respond to this situation unity. As the chair of G7, would like to lead the efforts as we work on them. And also, we have received questions from the floor.
ありました。
In fact, this is the second time that I attended the Munich Security Conference, and it was also about the same time last year, and the critical situation was quite imminent, and now we knew that the aggression actually took place, after which we met this time, and in conjunction with that, yes, I had a dialogue with Mr. Wang Yi of China in November last year. Prime Minister Kishida met with Xi Jinping face-to-face for the first time, and I was there as well. The stable and constructive relationship between Japan and China should be developed based upon such a dialogue, and I believe we made the very good the start. And I also discussed various matters with one of the high-ranking diplomats on February the 2nd, followed by the meeting with Mr. Wang Yi. Yes, we are faced with various pending issues and concerns, and that is the very reason why dialogue is essential. And therefore, together with Mr. Shin and Mr. Wang, we agreed on making a steady effort to move forward. And with China, together with various possibilities and potential, we are also faced with various issues to be resolved. But for a constructive and stable Japan-China relationship, to create that, we have to make our positions clear and also call for the responsible actions. And then we should cooperate with each other on common challenges and issues. That's how this relationship would develop, and that's the goal that both countries should move forward as a common goal. And there is another question about the remarks made by Prime Minister Kishida. What is happening today in Ukraine could happen in East Asia tomorrow. I agree with that. It is not just because my boss said that. I also agreed with that. That's why I referred to that statement in Munich conference, because that was a diplomatic exchange for remarks that were made there. Including the dialogue that I had with Mr. Wang Yi. I cannot disclose what was discussed specifically because that was a diplomatic dialogue. Thank you very much, Minister Hayashi. Prime Minister Kishida will soon arrive. Therefore, with this, we'd like to conclude the Q&A session with Minister Hayashi. Thank you very much for giving us a lecture and answering those questions. I'd like to express appreciation in a usual way. Thank you. Prime Minister Kishida, could I ask for your remarks?
Shall I take off this mask? Okay. My name is Fumio Kishida, Prime Minister of Japan. Today we have Mr. Oka, Chairman, Mr. Sasae, President, and distinguished participants and ladies and gentlemen. I would like to offer my heartfelt congratulations on the convening of the Tokyo Global Dialogue for the fourth year in a row. I understand that the theme of this year is the end of post-Cold War era. The aggression against Ukraine, launched by Russia last year, is not only an issue of Europe, but a challenge to the rules and principles of the international community as a whole, which truly signals the end of the post-Cold War era. As Japan faces a severe security environment, when I witnessed the unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force occurring for real, I felt a strong sense of crisis that Ukraine may be the East Asia of tomorrow. That is why last year, as Prime Minister of Japan, I made the decision to respond firmly to the aggression by imposing severe sanctions against Russia and providing strong support for Ukraine, and have deployed active diplomacy together with the G7 and other like-minded countries. This year, as the presidency of the G7 and a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, Japan is in a position to lead the support for Ukraine in its fight against Russia's aggression and to lead international efforts in upholding a free and open international order based on the rule of law. Under such determination, Japan has decided to provide an additional 5.5 billion in financial assistance to Ukraine in addition to our assistance to date. This is in response to the needs of people deprived of their livelihoods due to the war and restoration of destroyed infrastructure. We will work to obtain Diet approval of the relevant laws and regulations. Furthermore, I will convene a G7 summit teleconference on February 24th, the date when the aggression started a year ago, inviting President Zelensky as well in order to remain united in addressing the aggression against Ukraine and to connect the discussion to the Hiroshima summit in May. Due to Russia's behaviors, the world now faces another real threat of nuclear weapons. Against this backdrop, it is of great significance that the G7 leaders gather in Hiroshima, a city that once suffered from an atomic bombing, to discuss nuclear disarmament. It is also important to convey the reality of the atomic bombings to the world, including the G7 leaders, as the starting point of every effort toward nuclear disarmament. From this perspective, we are considering the programs of the Hiroshima summit, including a visit to Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. The history that nuclear weapons have not been used since the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki must not be ignored. From Hiroshima, we would like to send a strong message on this point to the world. Japan's security environment is as severe and complex as it has ever been since the end of World War II, with unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force in the East and South China Sea, and North Korea's increasing nuclear and missile activities. In order to respond to these realities, the Japanese government formulated a new national security strategy at the end of last year and made a decision to drastically change its security policy. Needless to say, however, the first priority is diplomatic efforts. We will actively and vigorously pursue realistic diplomacy, including at the summit level. Through repeated exchanges of views with the leaders of various countries, I have been keenly reminded of the high expectations placed on Japan by the international community and the weight of responsibility that lies behind these expectations. At the Hiroshima summit to be held against this backdrop, I would like to demonstrate to the world the strong will of the G7 to firmly reject any unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force and to uphold the international order based on the rule of law. At the same time, I would openly discuss with the G7 leaders the global economy, including energy and food security, regional affairs, including the Indo-Pacific, economic security, as well as global issues such as climate change, health, and development. At this historical turning point, the challenges facing the international community can only be resolved by the collective efforts of all nations and peoples, regardless of economic size, stage of development, different values and interests, to open up the next era. From this perspective, we will carry over the achievements of the G7 presidency to the G20, as well as building a new era together through dialogue and cooperation with all nations. I would like to conclude my remarks by expressing my expectation that the Tokyo Global Dialogue will help to chart the course for the post-Cold War era and beyond in order for Japan and the international community to tackle unprecedented new challenges. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Kishida. Now, Prime Minister Kishida excuses himself, and we'd like to send him off by a big round of applause.